can I steal a moment of your time before this episode plays? Thanks so much for listening to Labours of Sports Coaching. The appetite I see for the blend of academic and practical coaching conversations happening on the show is nothing short of amazing, and I'm determined to make this show bigger and better. Now, to help with that mission, please can I ask that you follow and rate the show 5 stars wherever you're listening. This takes maybe 10 seconds and has a massive effect on increasing the show's visibility, and as a result of that, its potential for future growth, which ultimately will enhance your return as a committed listener. Also check out the show's support links for anyone looking to offer that extra bit of backing. There's much more to come for Labours of Sports Coaching, and I thank you for joining and driving our new community. And with that, enjoy this episode. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to this episode of Labours of Coaching with me, Mark Carroll. I'm delighted in this episode to be joined by Craig Clark, who is first team coach at Scottish Premiership side Kilmarnock and also head coach of the under-18s at the club. So Craig, it's excellent to have you. How are you?
Aye, all good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I suppose I'm particularly grateful actually for you being available now, because I know you've got so much going on at the moment, trying to do different roles. This has been a bit of a breakthrough year for you, hasn't it, in terms of you're now working in senior football. How have you found that in terms of just managing that new dynamic, but also kind of balancing up with your other roles within the club?
It's been challenging from a personal point of view, just trying to get my head around a new role, a new diverse role. So the kind of background behind it is Chris Burke, who's a former professional, was the first team coach last year, and I was under 18s coach, and the manager decided this season to flip us. So Chris is the under 18s coach this year, and I'm the kind of first team coach. The head of coaching role comes under my remit to help support him and the rest of the coaches at the football club. So you've got that part of it. You've also got the training part of it, the analytical side of it, that I was probably not doing a lot of come through as a coach, but now as a first team coach, that's you look at your opponents in quite a lot of detail, because the games matter now, and I think that's the biggest part of it that I've had to adapt. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things as a coach. You have to learn how to adapt. If you can't adapt, you can't be able to deal with. I still go back to one of my very first experiences at a football centre in Kilmarnock many moons ago. And it was, I had on my own, we sent another coach. We always went with two coaches, but one coach had to go somewhere else. He had to go out, I think, Auchinleck to cover a session. And this is a new centre. We didn't know how busy it would be. I ended up with like 42 kids all by myself, and never been in that situation before, never had to deal with that kind of situation before, but I problem solved, I worked it out. And I think that early experience, that early exposure to dealing with a challenging scenario is something that I probably face, if not weekly, maybe daily sometimes. And you think on the spot, you think on your toes, because that's the nature of the beast. I think that's the nature of sport. Sport's quite unpredictable. The game of football is unpredictable. It's a game of random events, and as a coaching staff, as players, you're trying to make it less random. So I think if you scrape that back into your coaching experience and what the actual role I'm doing now looks like, then you have to be able to adapt and try and evolve with it as it builds.
It's interesting that you mention about what was helping prepare you for actually stepping into this role, even if you haven't had direct experience with certain things before. You've mentioned other aspects of your journey prior to this role coming up. How have you maybe reflecting back on your journey to date? How, if we can maybe elaborate on the way that has prepared you in different ways? We might even start at the beginning. Where did you start coaching? You'd mentioned working with youths and all those sorts of things, and then over time, over the years, where has that went to, and how has that maybe came together now to help you, cope with these challenges?
I think I need to look at my personal traits rather than professional, if that's what it was back then. And I think it's just general work ethic. I've always had a work ethic. I've done a lot of different a variety of jobs, worked in building sites. One of my biggest ones when I left school, I think probably the biggest influencer as well in that part, it would be my mum. So we grew up with a single mum, with 3 kids. I'm the oldest, 2 younger sisters. And she always had a work ethic. She went back to college because she had nothing. She was a stay-at-home mum back then. Went back to college, ended up getting a master's in I don't know, business development or something like that. I'm not too sure. I was not interested. Completely different way for sport. And I always seen a work ethic from her. So she told me when I didn't really like school. I was a general Joe, left school, standard grades. And she goes, "You're not." And I was working in a restaurant at the time. I was kitchen porter. I was a chef. By 19, I was then running the whole place, bar, restaurant, hotel. I was looking after the full thing. And she said when I was leaving school at 16 and a half, you're not leaving school to not go and do something. And I remember her handing me the prospectus for college. And because I liked sport and was very sporty, I looked at it and I went and done a NQ in sport, leisure and fitness, I think, or something. And that was at Old Kilmarnock College. And that was kind of the defining moment. So I was at college and then I was coaching or doing your placement, but still working in that diverse role, I guess, as a grafter. So again, it's kind of, I don't know if it's a stoic quote or anything. It's like chop wood, carry water, chop wood, carry water. And I've always been that type of person, just kind of carry on. So, and I think that then over time, if you add all those little pieces together, when I was 19, it was HNC, end of HNC year. I went to America to coach the Camp America. And I still remember vividly to this day sitting at the side of the pitch in the Orange County in California, crying because I wanted to come home because I wasn't enjoying it. I hated it. And then I couldn't wait to get home. But I then, just like you're saying, you reflect on it. When I got home and I started the HND class, you're doing that kind of, what did you get up to in the summer? You know, sitting in circle time, as I called it. And I was like, "Oh, did you have a good time?" I goes, "No, I hated it." But then what I seen over time was it was an experience dealing with different people, dealing with travel, dealing with being on my own at 19 when I didn't really know how to be on my own, first of all, but also traveling a different country, dealing with a different culture. And so I think, and then looking at that, I then finished my HND. And I'm not actually joking when I say this. I only applied for university because my mates were going. And it's incredible, and I didn't. I was like, and I still look back on it, and so I stayed in Prestwick at the time, and there was Bell College, which was just transitioning to the University of West of Scotland. So it was Hamilton campus, and it was the hardest year ever financially because I get no financial support. I was driving constantly up and down there. I was trying to balance. I had to leave the work I was doing, so I had to try and pick up some work, part-time work elsewhere, and that was really difficult because I'm not very academic. I can read a book, I can write an essay, but I'm not good with fancy words or anything like that. I'm very more just chop wood, carry water type guy. So then the opportunity came to work in the academy because I was doing a lot of community work at that point with my coaching. Did everything, night leagues, football centres, development centres, whatever it was. And then at the time, the opportunity came up to go to the academy and I started under 11s then. And that was 2008, 2009. And it was a total bug. It was that enthusiasm just to try and help people. And I always felt, I was thinking this earlier on about like why I coach, why I do the job I'm doing. Because if I look at my wife who's just changed her job and she's working with kind of trauma-informed kids, and I think it's just for some reason I wanted to try and develop the potential in individuals, just people in general. And I think that's what I really enjoyed. And it was working with younger kids, and you just had to be what I was like as a player probably. And I wasn't a great player, I wasn't unbelievable, but sometimes I could just have a bit of magic because I used to just do things that you do in the playground. And I always felt that having fun while coaching, while training was a fundamental for me. And then, so what I've developed over time from all those experiences is just having fun with something. And that's probably what's got me to this day here because I just had fun with it. There is that serious side, and MD that knows me knows I'm very serious. Like I'm probably too serious. You know, I hate being late, for example, but I think all these wee things have been developed from my experiences before. Before things became formal, which things now became and I think 2018 is when it became very formal when I became full-time with under-18s and had that 5 years experience with under-18s, and it became a bit more serious about structure and, you know, you still have your fun. And I always had fun with it, and I always made sure that when I was designing my session plans, there was kind of 3 things I liked. I tried to do something that the players liked doing. I tried to do something that I liked doing so that I was stimulated. but I also tried to make sure I was doing something new with my training sessions. Excuse me. And I felt if I was doing something new, that's having fun. And the players don't know it. I don't know how it's going to go. And I'd honestly say that to the players. I'll say, never done this before. I'm going to try it. Let me know what you think. And I think having been that type of personality, and again, my personality's developed over time, over different jobs, back to 2010, I think it was, when I started at Ayr College. My role then was a learning development advisor. And it was basically, I had beauticians, I had hairdresser students, bricklayers, plumbers, all, they're doing their NC or HNC course, and they've got their placement, whatever. But they come to me for the personal development skills. So they don't want to be sitting in my class. Because what am I going to tell them about personal development? That's what I used to say. And my flip side to that is, I just try to develop the potential in you.
And one thing I'm really interested with that, actually there's a lot of things in there. I mean, even that sort of idea of the sort of stoicism of, and a lot of people sometimes maybe overlook the importance of actually having a sort of philosophical outlook on your work and how things can be at times, because that stoicism is around like managing difficult times and how you can manage yourself in order to overcome challenges. And you can see that because you've had to go through probably quite a long journey towards where you are today. And I love actually, and I wonder if you could speak to this a bit more, but the fact that you mentioned working with young children and now you're working with seniors players, but it sounds like we're very often, one of the sort of connotations we have when we're talking about children's fun. When we're talking about senior football, we sometimes forget about the fun. And I'm wondering if that's maybe been something that you've held on to, which is a lot of people maybe it is very serious. And like you said, you're very serious.
Yeah.
But the fun aspect seems to have stayed with you a little bit.
I think, and I'm not going to mention his name, but there's a Premier League manager that I've spoke to this year, who I used to face as under 18s manager. And I spoke to him, you go in and see the manager after games, you get a drink or whatever. And I just stay in the background because the managers are talking. I'm just staying in the background, just listening, and anybody wants to talk to me, they'll talk to me. I'm not going to go and put myself out there and be that guy. And then he come up to me after it and shook my hand, goes, well done today. He's like that. And his words will never leave me. He's like, you done it properly. You done it right. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like that. So he just retired and basically went straight into the under 18s and started doing it there. He's like that. You work with the kids. You did all, I didn't want to work with the under 18s. I just wanted to go straight to working with first team. And that might suit some people. But see, when he had that reflection, and that actually made me think, maybe I have done it. Maybe the long road, but I have done it in a different way. And I think the different way is doing hours. And there's another scenario of another club in Scotland where the player is still playing, but he's doing the long road. He's working with the younger ones. He's enjoying it, by what I've been told. He's having fun with it. And he's learned how to have good sessions, have bad sessions, have difficult sessions. And the difficult sessions could be the weather. So I've done this perfect training session. Weather's thrown a spanner in the works. I still laugh about it because it now happens with Burkey. You plan your session in the morning, and the manager needs 2 players. So you go for a brilliant session with 9 players. I've now got 7 players. And then how do I then? That's absolute. I've used my ruler. I've used coloured pens. I've made it look brilliant because you take pride in what you do. But then how you then adapt to that. And I think if you can have that kind of fun element behind what you're doing to go for like step to step and not lose any enthusiasm from it, then I think that's part of that kind of, maybe not a stoicism part of it, but that mentality part where you just kind of keep jumping even without losing any enthusiasm for it.
Yeah, I see a lot, and it's something I sometimes need to remind myself of it, but I see coaches, and because they're so often watched by other people, there is a sort of sense of, if I'm working with older athletes, I need to be serious, I need to look shouty, I need to look aggressive almost, and it's almost like we're trying to fit a character, even if it's not ourselves, and I suppose there's something to be said around the authenticity of just being who you want to be and working with players the way you want to work with players. So yeah, I think that is really interesting. I'm also, you'd mentioned, Craig, around just the different pathways that people have, and I suppose that I'm really interested in your pathway because it's just one of many pathways that people can take into it. Some people are, they're straight out of the game, they're ex-professionals, and they've kind of even be fast-tracked through the process, and their niche is that they have had success maybe in an athletic career. Other people maybe have went through more of an academic route in coaching and it's more formal qualifications. Other people like yourself have just been in the trenches for a long time and it's on the ground, boots on the ground coaching experience. And you've mentioned about the need to do hard miles. Can you speak to that a little bit more? Because I find that is really it's so important. The hard miles, it's the good and the bad, and that takes time to accrue.
I don't ever think it was never intentional. Some people will make it intentional. I will do, they'll set goals. I will do this. I will do that. By the time I'm this age, I wanted to have this. I'm pretty simple. I want a relatively nice house and I want a nice car because that's my thing. In terms of my professional, I just want to work to as high a level as I can. And I never really thought, never ever in a month of Sundays would I thought I'd be in the first team environment. And that's the genuine truth. And the longer it came in, and I think you just develop your own belief system. And I think that's what kind of changed for me. My belief system changed. And I thought, I've seen some managers at Kilmarnock that were unbelievable. Like Steve Clark, for example, unbelievable. I took so much from watching him. Then I see other ones come in and fall a little bit. And I look at it and go, I knew just by watching it, I can do that better. And I think that's not an arrogant way, and I'm not arrogant. People might come across and go, he's quite arrogant. Saying that, it's not. It's a confidence that you know you can put on better sessions than what you've seen. And why I'm going to say that to you is kind of two things. Because I remember sitting with Steve Clark, who's our national manager, who's incredible to have that kind of contact with. And he said he used to feel that way when he watched sessions when he was our youth coach. And he said it wasn't arrogance. He was just like, you could just see you could do better. And it's a total confidence. And I took a lot of confidence from him saying that, because I thought, you couldn't say that because I didn't play the game. How can I say that about the manager who's played that manager's played the game? And none of my sessions were better than Steve Clark. So that's a fact, because his coaching, his style was very articulate. I'll say that. But when I did speak to him privately after that, and just kind of picking up what you said earlier on, I asked him for like a bit of advice if I'm going to take the next step forward, because I think the thing that matters is, or could matter, it might not, is your network. Who you can lean on, who's your soundboard, is it your wife, is it a friend? Like, I've got quite a good network, but as I've got older and further up the ladder, my network, my circles get tighter. There's maybe only 3 or 4 people I'd maybe phone if I needed advice, or if I needed a comfort blanket, if I had a bad day at the office. There's maybe that 1 or 2 that you'd really lean on. Other ones you just you could pick up a phone, go for a coffee or whatever. And he said to me, just be you. And I took a lot from that. It's really simple. It's such a simple thing. But if your personality's right, if you think you're doing the right thing because you keep your ego to a side, you work with pride. And I've always said that, I work with pride rather than ego. Your ego needs to come out at some point, and I think that ego is that confidence part of it. And that's the bit that comes out alive, I think, in games and training. So going back to your point you said before that, about, you go shouty and I need to be here. I think sometimes you need to have that, you need to be that way to have a bit of dominance in the group, if that's the right word, but also to give the group clarity on what you're doing. And I think I use my voice, especially when I'm coaching, especially senior ones, just to set demands, just to set standards, because and this is something I've learned to have fun when I was working with younger kids, is that the coach leads things. If you're quite quiet, quite laid back, that'll come through in your sessions. Guarantee that'll come through in your sessions. I don't mean you have to be an absolute Diego Simeone, Jose Mourinho at the side of the park, but you need to show a bit of what your team's going to look like, how you want the phase of play or the passing drill or the possession drill to look, or how you want your players to act in and out of possession. That comes from the coach. End of the story. Comes from the coach. Well, that's what you say behind the scenes. It might not be what you like at the touchline, but you need to have that drive needs to come from the coach. And that could be how you train over the week. It doesn't have to be on the pitch side. And that's when I'm going to round up with, for me, and talk about my pathway, I started to forge my own path. And I didn't mean to. It was completely unintentional, because I think it was more after I came back from China and Canada, where I had that bit of cultural experience, difficult, professional, personal. It was really difficult, but I had to step out. I was too comfortable what I was doing. So I had to step out of my comfort zone. And that was really important for me to know I had to do that, first of all. But to go into a different culture again, like as I said to you, when I was 19, I went and done it, and I found it very difficult. So I did it again. I think was it 27? No, I was 29. A bit later on in my... No, I was 29. A wee bit later on. So made sure that when I did that, I was getting life experience as well as professional experience. I didn't get a lot of professional experience at time as I thought, like I did when I come back for HND, I had a rubbish time, like in America. I actually had a lot that I could lean on. And that was the kind of defining moment for me when I came back. I came back into an environment. I started working 11-a-side football. Back at Kilmarnock, my job was always left home for me, but I had 6 months maybe under 13s. And the manager, the academy director at the time, put me up for under 17s. At the time, that was a massive step for me. Great, he had the belief in me, but also from a confidence point of view, because I didn't really have that confidence to work with older players, older players. And I had a good season and a half, yep, under 17s, and then I moved under 18s. So I've really just forged my own path, completely unintentional, making all the mistakes, still make the mistakes to this day, but they're less serious. But just try to refine things more than anything else. And it's been more forged my own path unintentionally, but again, I'll say it, going from hurdle to hurdle, speed bump to speed bump without any loss of enthusiasm.
And no wonder, in a way, that you have to be majorly confident, because, like you said, and I think the exact same thing, and I feel like people are. It's almost like we're expected to always show humility, and some people, like you've said, can misconstrue confidence in your ability that you have earned over time, like through doing serious hard miles, with arrogance. And it's like, I feel like that's something people just say when maybe they're faced with someone, because there is a lot of competitiveness within coaching as well, unfortunately. That's just the reality of it. But if you don't believe in yourself, how on earth are other people don't believe in you? And then when you mix that with the fact that, let's be honest, you sometimes as someone who doesn't have an professional background, you're already in some people's head a step back, and you need to convince people for reasons that are silly, but you need to convince people that they should believe in you. So you need to show that confidence. Yeah. I'm quite interested as well. You'd mentioned around the wider life experiences. And I wonder, is that a benefit of this particular pathway you've taken? Because, as we've said, some people forged their path in different ways. Some people have came straight out of the professional game that went into a team, and that's it, the coach. And other people have had varied experiences outside of the game. You were an educator. You've also worked in different cultures and seen different people. You've those sorts of things, and I just see that so to your benefit, without looking at these things as a deficit, as if you're having to make up ground. That's another thing that you've got that other people don't have.
I think when you break it down, it's almost like it could be conscious, but I'm a bit unconscious bias by people because you didn't play the game. And I've done a hard miles, but until you know somebody, you don't actually know anything. And I've got a saying: you don't know what you don't know. So until you go and you speak to the person or see how they act and how they come across or what they say, how they say it. And I think that's like the first team players always said, "Who did you play for?" And I'm like, I just played junior football. Because I did get a couple of bad injuries when I was younger, but see, if you look back on it, I actually started coaching very, very early. And I think that's been to my helping rather than being a hindrance, not having that experience, because I can now lean on. If I look at the guys I've got just now, I've got the manager, you've got Paul Sheeran, and you've got Alan Archibald. Between the three of them, they must have played about, they've got some 1,500 games probably. And then how many is, all of them have been managers. So add me into that, who kind of comes from a different perspective, different way of looking at the game, maybe. Because I do look at it a little bit differently, and that's fine because that's the game. But if you put all those experiences together, I think you get a really good working group. And I think that's the important part about it. But I'll go back to your point about you said about confidence. I don't think I'm confident. I don't feel confident. I think just over time I've built up a kind of a mentality that but that's probably the serious part of it comes because I'm just too serious all the time. That I go and it's just my work. Chop wood, carry water. It's just confidence can, you can maybe make a mistake or things weren't right. I always used to reflect on it. If it was a bad result or something, I let it eat me for 24 hours and done. Move on. And I think having that develops your self-efficacy in a sense, so that you can just go from to the next day and still perform.
So would you say you're good at managing yourself because you'd spoke around you're not necessarily had like a natural sort of aptitude for like intellectual stuff, like that's not you were saying that isn't really you, but it sounds like you have developed a emotional intelligence. It sounds like you're good at managing yourself and how you actually push through challenges, because I always wonder, and I speak a lot to students around this too, like doesn't matter how much knowledge you have if you haven't got the capacity to take that knowledge through and communicate it to other people, but then handle the the back from that, you won't go very far. It's just interesting you speak to those things, because that clearly, or at least if I'm reading correctly, that seems to have played a massive part.
And again, it's probably been completely unintentional, and it's just something that I've just done. I've found coping mechanisms. I've found ways to get over it a little bit quicker each time. I think certainly this season, I feel I'm more I'm a cog in a wheel, whereas before I've always been a wheel. So I've always had to kind of jump back quickly and be the one that leads it. And maybe I had a bad day at the office, quickly put the plaster on it and go and move over it. Then when you have to rip that plaster off, it's no sore. And I've just found it over time, just maybe being a little bit easier to go over things, how to manage things. Again, I've talked about my network. Generally, if you get someone that tells you that you're wrong when you need to hear it and you don't want to hear it, that's the most important thing. And I think you've got to have those people in your people behind you. People will say, "No, Craig, you're wrong," or "I hear what you're saying," but then having that kind of those conversations are night and day to push through the realms of reality, push through the realms of developing your own mentality. And I do see that a bit when I was working with under 18s, even the kind of the younger ones, 17s onwards. When you're 16 onwards, when training players and coaching players, for me, there's two ways. There's only two ways you can really develop them. Everything else is a byproduct of your training. But two things: tactically, get them to understand systems, what the demands are for first team, and the mentality, because they'll never have to deal with what's coming next, because the game's completely different the minute they hit over 16. When they come in under 18s, reserves, lower league, junior league, League 1, League 2, Championship or Premier League, whatever it might be, it's a unknown entity to them. So then that mentality part of it becomes the biggest thing you'll be able to help them with. And I think that's the same for coaches. Your mentality is developed probably alongside everything else, kind of running parallel to everything. And if you've not got a strong mentality, no, you need a strong mentality, but you need a resilient, again, I'll say that, bouncy thing to thing without any loss of enthusiasm. Because if you do that, and if you let it eat you, I've been there, if you let it eat you, then you won't be able to function, because you'll be too worried, anxious, whatever words you want to use, however you feel, that'll consume you. And I know that because that's how I felt when I was abroad, because I had too much going on and I couldn't deal with the things personally. So that was my makeup that way. So I couldn't do my professional job properly because the personal things wasn't right. So it wasn't on an even keel. And I've developed that over time, being away again, doing it again, and making sure that I was better next time. Because I'm quite stubborn. You can call me stubborn, but I'm quite determined that way to make things better. I think that goes back to, I want to make people better, but also want to make things better, make it as good as I can be. Don't like losing games of football, don't like losing on anything, don't like things not being right. So I always try and do always a little further, always a little more, is always the kind of mantra I've went with, just to make sure that I've done enough. And that's back to what I said before about it's my work ethic.
And I'd be interested to know, actually, how do you market yourself then? Because that's something I'm always quite interested in. Like, we're going back to the conversation around how you have to sort of create a niche for yourself. I'm assuming you've sort of created I would expect anyway, that you've created a sort of, when people think of your name, they're going to attack certain things with it. So we try to control that often, I think, as coaches, what people think of us. And I just wonder if you can speak to what your particular niche was, if you're wanting to be known for something where you lack in one respect, what you actually can give in another twofold. What would you say towards that sort of thing? Because a lot of coaches want to create that for themselves. We're trying to market ourselves, but we're very similar. So it's becoming difficult quite often to separate ourselves from other people.
Pretty simple. I don't market myself. I don't shout about myself or shout about this or that. I said to you all laughing and joking, but I don't actually have a clue how to work my LinkedIn properly. And I'm saying that kind of flippantly because I'm too busy doing the groundwork. I'm too busy, and I always remember I think the exact saying, but it's something like, "Don't talk about your character. Let other people talk about your character, and that's your reputation." And I think that's that. When I read that, I was like, "That's so true." So my network, go back to your network. If people are talking about, Craig Clark, then it's, oh, by the way, he does this really well, or he's too serious, or whatever the conversation will be. I think that's important because if you go and like you see a lot of people kind of self-promoting on social media, and I've kind of looked at that before. I've got a Twitter account, I've got an Instagram post for my coaching, and I was like, I'll put coaching drills up there. I'll get some I'll do a TikTok. Everyone's doing the same thing. Everyone's doing the same thing, and what you're actually getting is too much information, and you're getting everyone trying to do the same thing, and he's all just up stepping on each other's toes almost. And it's just how you be you. Going back to that again, and I remember, and I'll never again. That's the most simplest thing that someone's told me, but it's so true. And I don't want to shout about myself because I don't want to shout about myself. I just want to go on with the work. I want to do the work. I want to do my job. And it's funny that I'm saying that because when I was under 18s, the last thing I used to have it printed out in a A4 bit of paper, laminated, and it was up in the door. It's the last thing that the boys would see in big capital letters: "Do your job." And that's for them, but also as us as staff, like, do your job. Just make people better. Help them with the game. Help them understand the game. And my job is to make people better. And if a consequence of that is I'm promoting myself at the same time, then fine. The club have photographers, they've got the videographers and stuff like that. If I'm on that, then I'm on that. But I'm there to support the manager and the staff and the players and to do my job. So when it comes to kind of self-promoting, then it's on. At the same time, I'm probably doing myself in a little bit because I'm not putting myself out there for other people to see, bigger networks to see. But just now, I just need to worry about my network and growing it.
But actually, I think there is a big lesson to that because sometimes social media, as much as we can convince ourselves that we're doing productive stuff, it is sometimes just a form of procrastinating. I think there's a saying, play silly games, win silly prizes. Being the best at social media doesn't equate to being, the best coach with all these opportunities. It just means you're a guy that's on social media or a woman on social media. I'm wondering, however, if I can play devil's advocate, what about for those coaches that have maybe came from a similar path as yourself, or even just their own path, but they maybe just aren't known, and they're trying to maybe create opportunities for themselves? What would you say to them? Because that's the hard part. That's the bit that everyone that, again, if they've maybe came from a background that isn't from being an ex-pro, that they would probably love to know about, or even just get some gleam of insight. Because again, I suppose, is it you're mentioning around how it's easier to market yourself now because you have people watching you, you've got that opportunity. What about when you don't? And I'd love to know how you got to that part to help with it in the first place.
I think just to finish on the last point there, that I'm now in a byproduct of where I'm at in my professional capacity. But the simplest way for anybody that's, I wouldn't say desperate, but wanting to push on and develop and get into the next level is just do the work. And if you do the work, and I even think back to, and just when you're speaking there, I'm thinking back to what did I do differently? It came back to my network. So even when I was, I don't know, in my 20s anyway, they used to do the B licenses, the A licenses down at Largs. And because I had a kind of network and it was a coach's network basically, they used to want runners. So you used to just go and take part. And even that in itself, you learn from other coaches watching you. They talk to you, you have lunch with them, you end up having conversations, and it ends up, and I remember doing my B licence with some players, and some of them people I still keep in touch with to this day. And you never know what conversation might come up with that later on if you leave a footprint on them. And that's just, well, in a way I did that, and it was just completely natural to me. Was I had a lot of coaching experience even at that age. When did I do my B license? 2013, I think, or something like that. 2013, 2014, something like that. And because I had such a lot, they would ask you questions on their session plan, and you could offer a little bit of help, and you strike up a lot of relationship because of that. I've still got friends that are on that. But going back to the one about the runners, you end up getting coached by top players. that are trying to coach, and you learn off them, you learn off each other, I always felt I learned better in. So for any coaches that are still playing, keep playing if you can, because you actually learn. I think Horst Fide said that when I went to a 3v3 kind of coaching seminar that he was doing, and I'll come on to that in a wee minute, and he even just said, just keep playing for as long as you can. Now, unfortunately, my body, I couldn't. The aftermath of a game was just too much. I just couldn't cope with it. And I think any opportunities for further development, professionally or personally, I think you've got to do it. I remember I always used to go and, so you always used to have like your 3 nights a week in your game at the weekend. In academy football, that's what you get paid for. And I'm saying paid in kind of inverted commas there. But you only ever had to do 2 nights out of the 3. Muggins here used to do it all 3 nights because I loved it and I had fun with it and I enjoyed it. I look at my job, I had under 18s one, so you do your 5 days a week, your game on a Friday, that counts as one of your 5. My game wouldn't be till 7 o'clock at night. I was still in at 9 o'clock in the morning, doing all my paperwork, get myself ready for the game, doing the hours. You've got to do the work. And I think even when it came to working the younger ones, if they were asked to be runners at the advanced children's licence in Tory Glen, for example, I'd go along. And I'm still there. You're still working with that pride because it's your team. You're not just sitting there and go, all right, you see you later, I'm away for my day off. And I don't see it. If you want to be successful, you can't really have a day off. And I'm not saying that you need to work constantly up late. I don't bring the laptop out after 8 o'clock. I don't go on social media normally after 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, because just like you're saying there about procrastinating, you just end up going down the scroll hole, and that's not good for you. I felt that wasn't good for my brain the next day because it was flooded with information. I don't go on my phone in the mornings. When I wake up, sounds daft, I drink 2 glasses of water, I go on my drive to work, maybe I put a podcast on, but I don't go on any social media in the morning because I need my mind for what's coming next. And that was something I learned quite quickly, because something might happen, might come up, and that just completely distracts you. So I think you need to then start taking another thing I've done, I'm maybe digressing a little bit here, but this was to help me, was I took all the notifications off on my social media. Because I was sitting there doing my session planner. It sounds really simplistic. Sitting doing my session planner, and I was in the moment. And as a coach, you're in the moment. You feel you've got a wee idea. You want to write it down, and then you get a notification on your phone, and it's just your mind wants that dopamine hit straight away. So once you answer it, you've got a notification. You want to see what it is. So I decided to take all that off. It goes back to something else I always say, is control the controllables. What can I control? I can control my concentration and my commitment to doing this this job. And I'd rather be a metre into one job than an inch into 10 jobs. Just making sure I concentrate on one thing at a time. Because you can find yourself doing that if you've got things going on your phone. You're trying to do too much and not getting anywhere at all.
Do you know, it's really interesting actually hearing about that, because it sounds like you focus on your process, and there's actually a bit of research out there around, just the fact that we have a waning amount of attentional capacity nowadays, and actually there is a strategy around how you can keep attention. Just you have a finite amount of willpower across a day, and what do you spend it on? Just if you spend it too early on the wrong things, that's how you're going to feel tired later on, and you can't concentrate. And it's just interesting, and I've used this myself, but it's interesting, like, you can both work hard, but you can still have a work-life balance, and you can still, if you're disciplined, ring fence time for rest and recuperation. But it's, again, if you are not paying attention and focused at the right times when you're meant to work, then your day's going to become so much longer. And then all these issues that can so easily happen in coaching, that you do become overworked, becomes an issue. Yeah. But it's just really interesting as well, you mentioned around, go and do things for people in the club. Go and, make yourself available for things where you can't show that you're keen. If there's a game to be covered, go and cover it. Because I suppose that would that have helped people get to know Craig's really reliable, Craig will come, Craig's always there.
But there's also that, and but don't find a balance to not become a yes person. I would always say a yes man, but it could be women that listen to this as well. Don't be a yes person. So yes to everything. Have your boundaries. Have a line you're not going to cross. So if you've committed to doing something with someone, then you do it. What I used to do is try and fit in both, which isn't helpful, but you learn how far your boundary line can go for there. But no, you do cover games. The email or text comes out. Can anybody help? I've seen myself go through to Tranent in Edinburgh on a Sunday afternoon because I needed cover, and I've I've had to make allowances for that, but that's the work you've got to do, because you've not, I'm just saying this kind of flippantly, you've not been there at 3 o'clock on a Saturday doing that legwork. So you've got to do the work in a different way. Whether that's in girls' football, women's football, or men's football, boys' football, it doesn't matter. You've still got to do the work. And I've coached women's. Like, I took pre-season for the Kelly ladies here because they were stuck. And who did they turn to? Me. But whether because I was a yes man, no, it wasn't. I reached out to my network, asked for a bit of help from some of my other coaches, because I wasn't too sure how it would look. I wasn't sure how I'd feel doing it, and I wanted to have support. So it goes back to that support network of who you've got next to you, who you can rely on, so that if you're being relied on, who you can rely on to help you in that scenario as well.
Is that a simple choice in who you see as being a mentor or as a critical friend? Are they easy to come by? Or do you think actually, yeah, they can be if you go and reach out for someone? Maybe it's the case of just asking the question. I don't know. I see a lot of benefit from having those people that can tell you when things aren't right, but are also there to tell you that they're doing well, and can be maybe an avenue to an opportunity if, again, you impress them. The reason I asked that as well, Craig, is that I think it's a great point when you're making around on coaching courses, and some people can forget that the coaching course is as much a network opportunity as it is a formal education opportunity. You interacting with people on coaching courses and getting to know people can open so many doors, and potentially that's widening your network. But then also there's that, you need to have maybe a close network for the people you can really trust and turn to in order to be a bit more vulnerable. I wonder around that. What would you say?
I think it's a pretty simple way to round it up. It's just your relationships that you've got with people. So I'll have relationships with people that it's mutual respect. They respect me, I respect them. And there could be other relationships where I know that person's got that professional understanding that I need. And it's a need and a want at that point. Every relationship you've got, it'll be a different dynamic. Older friends. Funny enough, my biggest mentor, and I can't thank him enough ever, was my old boys club coach. And he actually phoned me this morning because he still works at the club. And I work with him at under 17s, and I work with him at under 18s at Kilmarnock. And he tells you the truth. He's a truth teller, and you need one of those in your life. You need somebody just to say, like, I just remember sometimes getting too animated outside the pitch, and he goes, "You need to calm down, you need to shut up." And hearing that from him, whereas I've heard it from somebody else, I didn't have that, not respect for, but it's not what I wanted to hear from them, or it's not what you want to hear, it's what you need to hear from them, if that makes sense. You don't take it the same way as you would have took it for somebody else, because you've got that respect for them, because maybe they're older. Someone's maybe the same age as you or younger than you, would you listen to them as much? Probably not. But it goes back to the relationship, the type of relationship you've got with that person or those people, and what they can do for you, but also what you can do for them.
I'm wondering then, and the flip side of that then, because you're also a leader and people are looking to you for support and help. And I'd be interested in knowing, because I think a lot of people that want to and are aspiring to be in your position now, they'd be curious to know, when you've now stepped up to working with first team players, when you spoke about the fact that despite you bring so many benefits to that role from your wider life experiences, how do you create credibility with those players in a way that we know it should be obvious, but that can quite often be quite narrow towards your athletic achievements? Is it actually just a case of letting them see you do the work, or is there more than that? Is it an easy thing?
I'll put it, I think sometimes you're looking too much, and this is where you need that ex-professional to bounce things off of as well. And I always felt as if when you're working with the players, sometimes I'm fighting for the respect a little bit. But I don't know if that was me, or if that was me being paranoid, if that makes sense. Maybe not paranoid is the right word, but it goes back to not being confident or not. And again, just by doing the work, I've got, when I'm doing things on the pitch, it's second nature to me. The minute I get that first word out, I just become me. And I always just keep reminding myself, just be me. Maybe when I'm doing something a bit more technical, I've got to maybe be a bit more assured of what my aims are. So I'll always write everything down anyway, what I'm doing, what I'm delivering, what I'm doing. I maybe bounce it off other members of staff to see what they think. And you're maybe not seeking reassurance, but you're just maybe just looking for that little bit of assurance rather than reassurance that what I'm delivering is going to be helpful to what we're looking for Saturday. But I always remember speaking to an ex-pro when I said to him, I'm like, I just feel as if I'm always trying to fight for respect with him. And he's like, and I said, I gave an example of what I meant by that. And he said, that's just football players for you. They just look like that. They don't mean it. It's just their demeanour. It's just how they are. And that was quite important for me to have that. That's a different relationship I've got with a different person saying that to me, because maybe it was just a little bit of, I'll use the word paranoid, but it's not what it is. It's not, I know how paranoid feels. It's not that. Probably a little bit, because I've not had that. This is the first time, the first season I've had that. And what was that yesterday? Session 140, I think it was yesterday. So I've had 140 sessions of it now. So you think over the course of time, that'll get better. Do you know what I mean? And maybe because it's my first year at it, next season will be different. But I don't think, I always felt that the players were better when I sat with them one-to-one. So I'll sit and do some clips. I'll add my take on what I've seen, and you strike up a relationship, a partnership with the players that way. I felt that once they maybe heard what you've got to say and how you see things, they maybe get a little bit of respect that way. Whether it is respect or maybe it is, this guy can actually help me, and that's my job, as I said earlier.
And it's cool actually how you'd mentioned you try and grab opportunities to display competence. If it is like there's a technical instruction, look at how detailed I can give a technical instruction. Does it work both ways? Because I always, and actually I would just, before I got into that, I always think it's useful for someone to carry a little bit of imposter syndrome, just even as they develop expertise, because it keeps you wanting to put as much effort in as you can to really perform well. But I've spoke to some ex-pros before as well, and when you've been fast, and the flip side of it, if you're fast-tracked through a coach education system and you've maybe not had as many on-the-ground hours and comfortability being in front of a group, that can also bring with it challenges. But I wonder if, as you'd mentioned, Craig, that and what you'd had a colleague that maybe attested to the same, do we maybe overthink what the players think? Because players ultimately care about themselves, and maybe if they see you're doing a good job, do they really care at that point where you're coming from, or all these other things? I wonder if that's an internal thing that coaches can have.
I think so. I think over time I changed to help them, to make it more stimulating for them. So rather than if I was doing a phase of play, for example, I'd get to go this way. This is the scenario what I paint. So full back to whoever, wide player, and second striker out the other side, cross and finish. I now do 5 very fast finishes, so they don't actually have time to think. So maybe the ball goes from centre mid to striker, turn and shoot. Next ball, I play the next ball out really quickly. Centre mid, wide player, cross and finish for 2 strikers. Whatever it might be, 5 really quick finishes. And basically there's a lot more enjoyment about it. They get a lot of hits to the ball. They're stimulated. They're always thinking, because that's like the game. Possession exercises, making sure that you need to be a good referee, first of all, because they are adamant on the rules. So that's a big learning thing for me. And I always used to say, if I made a mistake, bad referee, get it on a Saturday, and just try and have a bit of personality about it, because that gets them round a wee bit. But just going back to the word that I was probably looking for earlier on, was probably that imposter syndrome, that imposter. But what I've done, because I've definitely suffered for it, I think everybody does. And see if you don't, you're lying to yourself. You're lying to yourself. But what it used to cripple me, it really did. It used to really, not to a point where I would still go and do it, the work, but it wouldn't be my best work. And I knew that, and I used to be annoyed myself for letting it eat me. So over time, what I've actually done is I've used that as my fuel. And I would normally, in my head, I'd probably swear, but I would tell it, no, I'm going to show you. And the more times you do that, I actually end up using it as fuel and to fire me up, to keep me ticking over, and that probably built my confidence up a little bit, because I was keeping that guy quiet. It's like the guy on your left shoulder, the guy on your right shoulder. The guy on your right shoulder's trying to cause havoc. This one on your left shoulder's trying to reassure you and make you feel better. I used to use the guy on my right shoulder and used to tell him to disappear. And over time, and I'm not talking about just this season, because this season was quite a big one for me in terms of my personal development and my professional development, but certainly under 18s, dealing with different players, different dynamics. That was always something I was trying to keep and not probably keep control of, but certainly how it affected me.
Do you know what's really interesting there? And only this comes to mind because some of the stuff that I do myself, I'm working with players and try to make them think about how they can manage themselves better. You're actually kind of displaying sort of like mental skills that you would use on yourself as well. Like even the idea that you've got an internal dialogue, that you're coaching yourself and trying to hype yourself up and telling yourself to do well. Sometimes we can overlook the need to actually kind of do what we preach to players to do. We tell players to be confident, we tell players to do these things, but sometimes it can really help us as coaches. I mean, I even the idea of sometimes a bit of separation and talking to yourself in the third person, it creates that separation in your head, because I think we are actually often better at giving advice than taking advice. And I've found that myself before a session. I'd be like, right, Mark, you can do this. You've done it before, or you've done something similar before. You can do this time. And there is something to say around that about speaking to yourself, and the fact that you're even able, like, it's a great, that kind of metaphor of who's on what shoulder, the devil or the angel. It's like that they're never going to go away.
Yeah.
And it's not trying to stop them being there, because you can't. It's your emotions. You can't stop emotions, but you can manage them.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I'm seeing implicitly a lot of that in the way that you're approaching things, and that you can see the effectiveness.
Yeah.
It's that's real.
Yeah. Again, that just comes back to experience. So I'm quite an emotionally charged person, just how I am. You know, as I said, I'm quite serious, but the ball rolls, like, I want to do well. I want my team to do well, I want my boys to do well, I want the club to do well. That's just how I am. That's just how I've been built, and that's not going to go away. But over time, I've just learned how to manage that a little bit better, whether it be my pitch side manner, whether it be how I interact with players, how I deal with challenging scenarios, how I go and deliver a session. This year's completely different, because my role primarily on a Saturday, I sit in the stand with a walkie-talkie, and I'm linked up to the assistant manager. So anything I see, there's a massive pressure for me to get everything right that I see, because I'm the only eyes and ears I've got up there. If I've got any tactical ideas, I put it across, and that could have influence on a game. You know, that's how serious it is and how it has to be. So I don't have any time for the imposter to be coming in and saying, and I still feel it sometimes when I get, yep, Clarky, thank you, or, you know, whatever it might be. But I think that's just the nature of the beast, and you've just got to roll with that a little bit. But it's going to be back to my previous experiences and just managing, you know, my own behaviour. And you don't know what you don't know. So you don't know that that's not the right thing to say at the right time. You know, and anybody you speak to is like, or any manager or any coach, like, I probably shouldn't have said that at that time. I can't think of any examples right now, but, you know, in reflection going, that's probably, I could have probably done that team talk a little bit differently. I could have said that message to that player. But that's only that, all underpinned by what I've done before. And then when you go and you're trying to tell players, you know, about talking to themselves and stuff like that, what you find is with a lot of players is it's the self-determination theory. They've been told for years, like, you'll get this if you do well, and, you know, a lot of them are not intrinsically motivated. I've always coming for something else outside, and you get that with players now, because look at the players, and this is for coaches that are listening, like, you don't know what it's going to be like in the next 5 years, because I'll tell you what players are influenced by now. This is probably not in a numerical order, but you'll see where I'm going with that. Social media, peers, parents, probably their education, because that has an influence. Agents, their coach and their football club come almost last, because these 5 that I've just counted off there have a bigger relevance in their life than the last 2. And the reason I put social media first is they've got that banner at Kilmarnock Football Club, player at Kilmarnock, under 14 player, and then you'll get that, and that's a beast you're going to have to fight. Absolutely, and that's their motivation. So their motivation isn't to be, and I always say that, to just be good. Don't worry about being the best, just be good. And I think that's, to sum up, probably something I've always done, is just be good. Don't want to be the best, just be good. It goes back to my standard guys. I just got all 3s, General Joe. Just be good. Just be fine. Just tick the box. Just get there, tick the box, move on to the next bit. And you just, over time, just snowball. And you end up with a bigger snowball. So I'm just calling myself a snowball.
And, you know, that is, again, I find it really interesting, even because around self-determination theory, there is always that question. And the self-determination theory attempts to answer that question of where should the motivation come from? And I wonder if a lot of coaches do often see themselves as needing to be the external motivator, but maybe the aim of coaching actually is to create an environment in which the athlete motivates himself. And it sounds like you're speaking towards what is the athlete's drivers and how can you foster that and use that as the springboard for change. But then, it's the silent coach. You're working in the shadow.
Again, I'll go back to my three-pronged attack with session planning. Something they enjoy, something I enjoy, something that's different than you. If you can build that into your sessions will run itself. Your sessions will run itself as long as it's no line. I remember, remember getting taught that back in America. That's probably one of the things I do remember. The 3 L's: no lines, no laps, no lectures. And it's so true. That's still relevant to this day. Like, don't keep away from your line drills unless it's for repetition and they're getting rest and recovery, rather than it just be because you're lazy and you don't want to set up two drills, for example. And I think when you look back to my sessions are always intense on the go. And I always felt because I had to be, certainly under 18s, they had to be intense because when you go up into the first environment, the intensity comes from the players because the players are just used to being at 100 mile an hour all the time. That is the truth. Like, at first team level, everything's done with a purpose, everything's done with intention. So make sure that younger coaches have that in their repertoire so that, one, the players don't get bored. First, that's probably the biggest thing. And second of all, so they actually find it enjoyment. If you do something you enjoy, you're going to do more of it, and you're going to want to do more of it. You're going to want to come back and do even more. And that's as a coach, that session really well, I'll do that one again. But what will you change next time? What can you adapt? What can you alter? What can you tweak? And I think that goes back to, if the players enjoy it, you'll get more out of it from that.
So the exercise is the coach. It's not the drills, and it's just the coach. The exercise is the coach.
It's stipulations, if you like, the rules behind it. If you're doing a small possession, it's going 2 ways. Like, make sure your sizes are right, but the competition element is right as well for the level you want with. So if you want a team, like, say that you've got small goals in one of them, and you're doing like keep the ball, score a goal, but it's a wee tiny samba goal. So what did the team do in defending? It just stand in front of it, so you get no goals. So then go, right, 10 passes gets you a goal, or score a normal goal. So the team need to come out and press. So you're getting defending and attacking within the same scenario, rather than it just being like one rule. Make sure that your rules, your stipulations are there to complement what you're trying to do, but also, determine what that session will look like.
It's the, and again, and correct me if I'm seeing something that isn't there, but when you mention about trying to promote different parts of the game at once, so attack and defend and all these things, I sometimes wonder if we do actually compartmentalise parts of the game too much, because we're often sort of we're taught to theme everything, and themes in itself sometimes tries to deny the dynamic aspect of the game. The game doesn't care about your theme. When the ball moves, everything's happening. But I'm curious, and again, maybe this wasn't what you were going on. It's just something I'm interested in, and knowing your thoughts around how do you chunk up the game, and should you chunk up too much, and is that something that you think about at times? Or
I think you can definitely manufacture things too much in the game just to suit the coach's ego. Or, I was looking at this today. Like, the game tells you what you're looking at, and you work backwards from the game. Making sure that the players are enjoying themselves, exposed to scenarios, attacking, defending, transition, whatever it might be, and just make sure that you're adhering to their needs. Whatever they need is what the coach should be delivering, not what the coach wants to deliver. And you can go through game models and principles of play and all that kind of stuff. That's great. That's brilliant. But I always feel that with a game model, you miss things, because the game's a teacher. The game teaches you everything you need to know. So stick to attacking, the thirds, whatever third it may be, first third, middle third, last third, defending, first third, middle third, last third, and then you're the bit in between, the transition. And then that's your game model for me, because that's the game. That's how it looks. And I had that conversation with Burkey a few weeks ago. He's like, great, you can do the build play. Great, we do final third attack. But what about that bit in the middle? How do we stitch it all together in the middle? Because the game is, like I said earlier on, random. I don't know what your team's going to do. You don't know what my team's going to do. I don't know what my team's going to do. They could take a bad touch, kind of a bad game. And it's how you then, that's coaching for me, is just trying to then bring it together and meet in the middle somewhere. So when it comes to game models and principles of play, that's all fine and well. I'd rather go with, this exercise, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3 key points. And if I get those key points, great. I might get something else. And if I get something else with it, even better, because I wasn't expecting it. It's something that I didn't see happening, but it's came out in it. And I think that's the beauty of coaching football.
It's funny in a way that we probably speak a lot around principles of play and how important they are, but there's probably principles of coaching that we need to be mindful of as well, like intensity, variety, that even opportunities to self-regulate, things like that. If you're covering the bases, you can't really go wrong. I think sometimes you can overcomplicate things and you're not focusing on the core, what prepares a player to kick the ball and do well at it.
I think it comes from your coaching identity. What is your identity? How do you want your team to look in training and in games? How do you want them to act off the pitch? That's all on the coach. That matters just as much as how you look and how your session plan looks. How they act, how they behave. So I always look at it, your coaching behaviours become more important. Are you going to stand for that player? So it's funny because my wee guy's 5 and he's playing and he always looks at me when he's playing. I'm like, don't worry about me. He's like, the Jenkin was good tonight. I'm like, just you play. And I think that's a byproduct of the coaches not giving enough praise. Because he's a wee guy, he's a tiny wee guy, he loves to dribble, doesn't know how to pass. That's fine. It was always coaches want to talk about passing the ball. The guys are 5 and 6. They don't know how to pass the ball. They don't want to pass the ball because he's used to playing with me in the back garden and it's just him with the ball constantly. So just make sure that we're adhering to, because every player got a different need. One player, when you get a wee bit older, one player will be able to see the pass. One player will just see dribbles. One player will love to tackle. And it's just how you harness all those little bits of area and then make sure that your coaching behaviours and your coaching practice align to what the needs are of the players.
It's so true as well, because I think as coaches you're taught to look at everything as a deficit, and coaching's seen as you correct a weakness. So to be seen to coach is about interjection, is about here is something that's wrong, here's how we can correct. Like you've said, players have, in some way, they've all got their own X factor. No player's going to be efficient in everything. They're always deficient in some things and very efficient in other things. And it's like, shouldn't you need to praise in as much as you need to actually correct, because it's not going to be that average skill set that gets them somewhere. It's what did they do really well and make them do it even better. And it's an interesting take on that.
I think it's their strengths make them super strengths, and make their weaknesses. You don't want to talk about weaknesses too much, but a player that wants to do well will want to know their weaknesses. They'll want to get better and make their weaknesses a strength, but their strengths are super strength. And I think that's at any level that they'll want to try and develop themselves. But as a coach, you probably need to be aware of that. You probably have to have the conversations with the players. The older they get, certainly, they might not even see themselves as having that efficiency, if you want to call it, value weakness. They might see themselves as, they might have that ego, talking too much, and maybe they've got someone that keeps telling you you're brilliant, but actually it's just a mask, when they actually need to know that their weaknesses is holding them back a little bit. But as coaches, the old 10 to 1 phrase, you say one negative thing, you've got to say 10 positives to get them to forget about that one negative. But you really should have a kind of a balance with that, and that you're not over praising them, because it then flips the other way and they don't think they're doing anything wrong. And then when they get, and the only reason I'm saying that is I had it a lot. I've had teams that come through to me, and because I've been the best player at academy, 14s, 15s, 16s, they get to under 18s and they can't cope with someone telling them that's not how it's done here, because the level, like I said earlier on, the level becomes a lot higher. So tactically and mentally, you're going to have to be able to adapt quicker and better.
How is that? It's very obvious when you say it. It makes so much sense when you're talking from younger to older. I'm interested, actually, from you now transitioning into a first team environment. How do you manage that tension there as well? Are you able to have the same critical conversations with A players, or should it still be about praise? Because is there still something to say about making people feel good, even when it's their job and they're expected to perform?
Yeah. No, players need encouragement no matter what age and stage they're at. They need to know when they're not doing so well that they can do better. And we're dealing with men now. generally, so they tend to take on feedback better. Again, it depends on the personality you've got in the dressing room, depends on the person you're speaking to. But overall, they want to do well, especially when the team's doing well. They want a bit of it. They want to be in the team. You can only select 11 players, so they'll generally want to try and get anything out of you to help them, be better and then stay in the team. So it's a total different dynamic to before we were working in development football. And some players are quite receptive to it. Some players you'll maybe never even speak to because they have a different skill set mentally that they can maybe cope with it, or they have their own answers. And I have my own answers as well, so I'm not going to say that's right or wrong. But I think they always know that they can come to them for any clarity you're looking for. And I think when they get older, when you're in the men's game, players just want clarity. What they're supposed to do. No grey areas. Just what am I supposed to do, and I'll do it to the best of my ability. And then if they can't do that to the best of their ability, that's when you've got some coaching point or think areas to work at. But normally, technically and tactically, then obviously mentally, these players are good with feedback because they want it. They want to do well. But again, it depends on the personality. If they want it, how they want it, and when they want it.
I would just say, to start to round off, Craig, coming back, just it's so obvious when you're talking, like your knowledge as a coach is just fantastic, and you're just such ability as a coach. It makes it all the more surprising when I think back to what you were saying earlier about you never initially thought of yourself as wanting to make it in the senior game. Now, I always wonder is there something wrong with that? Because having someone that had the determination you had and had the skill set and or at least the determination to develop that skill set. If you were to look back on maybe the coach that is trying to be where you, or maybe actually might to some extent not be as sure of themselves either, but they may actually still possess the potential to become like you have. Was that a product of the lack of opportunity, or was that just down to personal, preference or not quite knowing what you wanted to do? Because I suppose that what I'm interested in talking about is that issue around we want to, as you've spoken to, have changing rooms where there's a diverse staff, because we know that its pros bring so much to it. We know that players that have maybe came from more of an or rather coaches who came from more of an academic background can bring so much to it. Coaches that have done the hard miles can bring so much to it. Where do you think we currently are at with that we still see? For some, it's choice. For some, it's disillusionment, and they just don't feel like they can crack that. They can break that glass ceiling. It's a bit of a hard.
I don't think there ever was. Being honest, I don't ever think there was an opportunity there. There was never an opportunity there for a non-ex-professional like me to be in a professional environment like I'm in now. That's the truth. Reason for that is, if you look at any other country, I think Germany's probably the best at it, developing people, like coaches, good coaches, good people, and they don't really care if they're an ex-professional or not. You'll be able to tell me that better with other countries that have got more ex-professional, non-ex-professional coaches in their ranks. But if anybody out there does want to break that glass ceiling, as you put it, then it's going to come with a cost. And the cost is that uncertainty. The cost is that drive has got to come from within somewhere, that you've got to have a burning desire to get out your bed in the morning, to be in your bed late at night, to not have a personal life as much as you like it with your mates. I've learnt the hard way. And then you go into an environment where it's the highs and lows. And the football's full of highs and lows. But every game now for me at 3 o'clock on a Saturday matters. Everything matters. All your processes over the course of the week matters. And that's really stimulating. That is really stimulating. But it's a risk as well. Result-driven business, things can happen out with your control, and you need to be ready for that. So, having that mentality, having that network, as I spoke about earlier on, having your sounding boards becomes really crucial. And I don't think, at no point did I will go back to it, at no point did I ever think I'd be sitting in the chair I'm sitting in. I've said that openly to a lot of people. And I think that's just down to the work that's been done, the graft that's been done unintentionally.
Because it sounds like, it's again, I think, just a testament to your strength of character, because I do. There's such a thing as sort of like attribution theory, where people can see their circumstances being a product that's external to them, and it's either something to do with their environment hasn't been great, or it has been great and that's why they've succeeded, versus it's more of an internal reason. And I think sometimes if people feel smothered by their circumstance, then they don't harness actually the full strength of what they could succeed at if they did believe in themselves more. If we take more accountability without it being almost like in a disparaging way, as if to point the finger at yourself, it can actually, in the flip side, be very empowering, because like you have a choice, you have decisions that you can make, and if you really do want it and you chase it and you don't give up on things, and and I suppose one of the things this interview can provide for people is you need to educate yourself about the challenges you're going to face. Don't pretend they aren't there, because you're setting yourself up for failure. The only way you can overcome these hurdles is going to be by, look, I might have this. There's going to be a bias against me. We see it, and there is a bit of research around this. Quite often employers, and they do often struggle to look past this, not having a professional background in a sport as an athlete. But I mean, there was a study I was looking at by Schomp and colleagues. This was in 2016, and it was interesting because this goes beyond just football, other sports. And I think across 3 years, they tracked NBA, NFL, and MLB coaches, and they couldn't find a correlation between differences in professional playing experiences and success rate and competition. They can't find these things, and there's no evidence to suggest that these things do matter. It's not to say at the same time that it doesn't also help a coach, because they all have their own niche and there's things that they can bring to it. But it's just really interesting when you see a lot of evidence being built up. There still does seem to be a bit of a stagnation in progress. We still see research as recent as 2023 still seeing coaches talk about not having as many opportunities, a network not being as big. The self-doubt that creeps in, it's still there, and it seems like something we still need to push through, because there's so many great coaches out there that maybe we're not looking into the talent pool enough.
No, I do agree with that. I do think we're missing out on some better coaches, because there's no pathway. There isn't, but that's the society we're in. That's the network. I don't think that'll ever change. A bit of an outlier. I've said that before. I've spoke to other people. I'm definitely an outlier. I'm sitting in a seat and I don't feel privileged. I don't feel as if I shouldn't, or I shouldn't be. I'm just doing my job. I'm just doing. And I remember I was sitting. We were away in Dundee last week, the week before. I was sitting in a coffee shop before it, the day before the game, and there's a big kind of mural on the wall that said, "You're right. You're exactly where you're supposed to be right now." And that was it. And I was like, I just sitting there going, "No, you're right. I probably am." And that's where I'm supposed to. And what I've seen that is, you don't. It's just a resting place. I'm not here. I'm just resting. I'm doing my job. I'm doing my work. Chop wood, carry water, as I said earlier. But, and you said it earlier on, like, something will come blindside. Trouble always finds you. I don't mean trouble in a negative way. We're in a sport. You get trouble, you get conflict, you get problems to solve. That's sport. That's sport. Just maybe I'm being a bit drastic there when I say how I say that, and it's just how you go from issue, trouble, problem to problem without any of that loss of enthusiasm, and how you write it off and take the learnings from each one. That's going to be the reason you make it or don't make it, or break it or don't break it. And I'm not saying I have broken it yet. I don't think I have. I'm just working, day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, and just seeing where it takes me.
I think you're probably giving an answer to this already, but I was interested to know where next possibly, considering the current path you're on. Are you looking too far ahead, or is it still just about staying in the present and thinking about just doing a good job and continuing to do that good work?
The one thing I'd like to try and do eventually is my pro licence. I've applied a few times, got interviewed for the last one and didn't get on it. And again, you don't get feedback on it, which work that out at you as you will, but that's something I can't control, so I can only control my next part. So I'd like to do that at some point. And I don't actually know. I'd love to try. I would love to do it, but I'd love to be on the national pathway. Nothing would give me more pride into, work for my country. I think that's just something that everyone would love to do at some point. But I know that is a bigger glass ceiling than me and you will ever believe because of the internal politics and how it's all operated. But that's something that you can't control, so you can't do anything about it. That is possibly where I'd like to go, but at the moment, just doing the work, doing the hard graft, and just seeing where it takes me from there.
Well, I've got every confidence. I think you're going to continue to do well. So thanks so much for that, Craig. It's been absolutely excellent having you on. And hopefully for those that are listening, certainly it's given me a lot of food for thought, but hopefully for yourself, it's done you a turn and it's given you inspiration because, again, you can attribute things to external or internal, but if you can push through and think about internally, what can you do to get better, then it really is the case that your potential can take you to places you hadn't initially about. So hopefully this has been a good episode for you guys, and I'll see you next time.